Okay, I'm here with Jeremy. Brief introduction again.
Okay, my name is Jeremy Holt. I'm a partner in Clark Holt Commercial Solicitors based in Swindon, and I am a specialist in information technology law.
Okay. Now we've spoken in the first instance about a very brief way about GDPR. There's a couple of strange ones actually. We had a colleague who said that he met with the chap from BT, who alleged that even business cards were subject to the requirements of GDPR. Do you have a view on that?
Yes, I mean, for once, the man from BT is telling the truth. The business cards will contain what's called personal data,
right,
which is information about a living individual, the person who's named on the business card. And so that information, those contact details, consists of personal data, which will be covered by the current Data Protection Act, and which will be covered by GDPR in May next year. It's established that even just an email address is personal data.
So, I mean, this is, let's assume that it's a standard business card like the one I've given you,
Yeah.
which has got a work phone number on it, a web address, it's actually a post PO box in our case, and a work email account.
Right.
Is that's deemed to be personal data?
Yes, because it's different ways of contacting you as an individual. Now, when you gave me that business card, I presume you gave me that business card in case I needed to contact you in future.
Absolutely.
Or you perhaps left something in my office here and I needed to get it back to you.
Which is the same thing.
However, when you gave it to me, I don't think that you gave me implied authority to go and hawk that information to a number of life insurance companies or go and put it up for sale on the dark web. So you gave me implied authority to use that for my own purposes, but that implied authority didn't extend to me passing it on to any third party who you've never mentioned and who you might not want to have that information.
Surely your reference to the dark web implies something nefarious by definition.
Yes, I'm not quite sure of what you're saying.
Well, I mean, if you're selling anything on the dark web, then you're doing so on the understanding of the fact that it's not a legitimate transaction, surely.
Well, it may come as some surprise to you. I didn't do anything on the dark web, despite the fact I'm an IT lawyer based in Swindon.
Let me just untick that box.
Well, each to his own. Each to his own.
No, the whole essence of the dark web is it's about human trafficking and drugs and.
Or people who want to conceal their tracks.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, who have reason to conceal their tracks. Equally, to take up a point that you made earlier about best effort, GDPR is about best efforts.
I think it is. I mean, let's be realistic. Nobody can comply with the data protection legislation completely.
No.
And even the people that you speak to from the Information Commissioner's office, and the Information Commissioner is the government official who's tasked with trying to enforce this,
right,
even they recognise that you can't comply with all of it. So all you can really do is make the best efforts that you can to try to comply with the legislation.
Right. So in that context, then, I have hundreds. I must have hundreds of business cards that I've accumulated over the years in various drawers and scattered around the place. Now I know that I'm not subject to, or our business isn't subject to previously held information. But in terms of best efforts, you can't reasonably be expected to even, if I meet somebody on the 26th of May 2018, right, and they give me a business card, I can't reasonably be expected to log that and to register it, can I?
How do you mean by register it? All that it really means is that you've got to look at why they gave you that data.
Right.
Why they gave you that personal data. They gave you that personal data to facilitate communication between you and them.
Right. Well, let's take an example of it. You've got a nice glass bowl out there.
Right.
You go to. I mean, you don't do this as a business, but
no,
plenty of businesses do. They put a bowl out at the show,
no,
and they say,
no,
win an iPad, win a digital camera, win a weekend in London with cats or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Free business card in here.
Right.
That's a very, that really is.
One of the examples that the Information Commissioner gives in the publications that they've provided about consent, they have cited that specifically Now, the alleged purpose of collecting that business card is to put you in a draw for a prize.
Yeah.
What they have said quite definitively is that that does not mean that it is legitimate for the person who's collected those business cards to use them for marketing purposes.
What about
Now,
their own marketing purposes? They've approached us as a let's assume I do this at a small business show
Right.
In Aylesbury, courtesy of Aylesbury Vale District Council, and
Okay.
I run a show there, and I'm there touting our wares as a provider of broadband, email facilities, that kind of thing. I'm there, and it's quite legitimate what we
Okay.
do. It's,
I think you've got to look at the circumstances under which that was collected.
yeah,
If somebody comes up and says to you, "Can I give you my details?"
yeah,
Obviously, I think it would be clear that it was intended that there could be a commercial relationship between you and them
Yeah.
at that point. If you're simply collecting, it may sound strange to the viewer that this is the case,
Mhm.
but the Information Commissioner has chosen this as an example. You've got to look at why the person gave you the information. Now, if to take your example, if you collected a business card from a passerby at the show, it would be legitimate for you to take that back, put it on the system, and it would be legitimate for you to send them some marketing material later.
or call them.
Or call them, yes. All of that would be okay. If you've just put a big pot on the front and said, if you put your business card in here, you might win a bottle of whiskey at the end of the afternoon.
Yeah,
If a person puts a business card in there, they're simply trying to get the bottle of whiskey. They're not saying, please contact me, please bother me, in lots of different ways to do with it. So I think one of the consequences of GDPR is people have got to look much more closely at the circumstances under which they collected the personal data.
right.
Now, one of the most interesting cases I come across is that most companies think that if in one silo of the company they've collected some data, that they can use it in any of the other silos of the company. So let's say they've collected some data in relation to a supplier, and therefore you have that information in the accounts department there. So you've got that information, and perhaps it's on the company's database. That information was not given to the company for the purposes of receiving more information about their products.
Right.
It was given to them from the point of view that they were a supplier of some kind of services or goods. And so there's often a battle between the rest of the firm and the marketing department or the sales department, because they want to go and ransack all the data that they can get that's held within the company and use that for sales purposes. Now, it's quite clear under data protection law now, even before GDPR, that is not a legitimate activity, and that's not the right way to deal with it. It may come as a surprise to the viewer,
No,
and it may come as an unfortunate surprise, but I can assure you that that is the case.
Well, there are plenty of businesses, IBM for example, where counter trading is explicitly forbidden.
Okay, well that's good. I mean, it
has been for a very long time.
okay, I'm pleased that that's the case.
Yeah, I mean the whole idea of approaching a supplier and saying, do you want to buy some, can we sell you something else is a very good way of curing a pitch with the supplier. That can go very wrong very quickly.
I bow to your superior judgment.
Yeah, thank you. That's very, very gracious. No one's ever said that to me before. Okay.
I'm sure they'll say it again.
Okay. Well, where do you see the how do you make money out of this as a business?
How do I make money out of this? Right. I'm in the business of providing peace of mind. If I'm not giving peace of mind to my clients, I'm not worth the sausage.
Right.
So this is an unknown. I mean, my social life is so bad, I actually find data protection really quite interesting. So
that's pretty bad.
I think it's even worse than that.
Have you considered a hobby or keeping tropical fish?
I find if I stay at home, it really helps. So I find this area quite interesting because I'm fascinated by the flow of data.
Yeah.
This country is one of the data capitals of Europe, which is why the government's so worried about the implementation of GDPR
For now.
in case we lose some of the data industries that we have in this country.
Yep.
Now, I like data because it's like water. It's of itself, it isn't worth anything at all. It's only when you start to move it around does it start to become more valuable. And a lot of organisations have no idea of the value of the data that they're actually sitting on. Now, some of that data is financial data, some of that data is personal data. Now, for these purposes, GDPR and data protection legislation, the current data protection legislation, only covers personal data. It's only information about living individuals. So if it's all financial information, or if it's all geographical information, that's not covered by GDPR.
But surely, financial information is one thing. It's financial information about corporate entities and about the state of their bank account.
Yeah.
But as individuals, I mean, the whole point of that financial information is it has to be allocated to a person who lives in a specific place, and that then means that it's real personal data, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, if you had a bank statement and it was addressed to an individual within the company, the individual's email address or contact details there would be personal data. But the financial information about the company, the pure financial information about the company on that bank statement would not be personal data. It would only be the address.
So that would be in effect the same as sending it through the post. So it could, for example, be opened, or clearly that's going to be a break of the law.
Yeah.
But the harsh reality is if it's misdirected or whatever, wrongly delivered, whoever it gets to can open.
There might be a breach of confidentiality in legal terms, but there wouldn't be a breach of either the current Data Protection Act or GDPR after May next year.
Right. Okay. Well, that's an interesting point. So, what are your thoughts about all this? Where's it all going?
Where's it all going?
Is it good for your business?
Well, consulting a lawyer is a bit of a distressed purchase, and it's a bit like buying a set of tyres. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I think I'll go and buy a set of tyres. Mm. But as I said earlier, I'm in the business of providing people who are kind enough to pay me some money with peace of mind. Mm-hmm. And if I was running my own business, I'd think, oh goodness me, GDPR is going to come in. Right, let's try and tackle it early on. Let's try and get one over on the competition by us tackling it. Let's make sure all our salesmen know what GDPR is so they can talk to customers about it. And let's say we've taken this, and let's be able to say to potential customers, we've taken this very seriously. I suggest you ask some pointed GDPR questions of any competitors of ours that you speak to. So in a way, there's an opportunity for...
So it's useful, so fully appreciating what it is and how it works and articulating that to your customers is a useful marketing message.
I would say there's a marketing opportunity there. The other thing is, a second argument for doing it early is as you come up to GDPR, the arrival of the General Data Protection Regulation or the enforcement of it or the implementation of it in May next year, anybody who knows anything about the legal side of data protection is going to be rushed off their feet. So, an early booking avoids disappointment.
Yep.
Lawyers will concentrate on their biggest clients, lawyers will concentrate on their existing clients to try and help them over the stile. So you might as well get it sorted out. In addition to that, any commercial contract that involves the exchange or the transfer of personal data from one of the contracting parties to the other, if it runs after May next year, will need to be able to comply with GDPR, even if no one had thought about GDPR when the contract was originally entered into. And what I can see happening is a lot of addenda or side letters or side contracts between existing contracting parties to be able to tackle the issues that are raised by GDPR.
Right. Okay. So it's an opportunity in terms of your business. It's an opportunity.
Well, my job, I act for a wide range of businesses. My job, or part of my job, is to help them to be compliant with new legislation that comes in. Now, they may not like it, they may not approve of it, or they may think it's not the best legislation that there is around.
I don't like paying tax.
Have you got any other confessions that you
you
want to make?
No, I understand that it's required of me, but I don't regard it as something that I would choose to do.
Right. Okay. I'm afraid the option doesn't exist in relation to GDPR and personal data, unless you want to ship everything outside the European Union and not have any information about citizens within the European Union.
Yep. Well, again, that articulates the point, doesn't it? Yes, it's death and taxes. It's death, taxes, and GDPR. I think is the long and short of it. If you want to continue trading within the European. Now, clearly, we've got but whether we like it or not, Brexit is upon us. What effect is that going to have?
Brexit is not going to have any effect on this at all. I know some people. It's a bit of a myth There are a number of myths about GDPR. One of the myths about GDPR is, why do we have to comply with this European legislation if we're going to Brexit? Right, first point, a number of points in relation to it. The first point is that this all comes into force before we Brexit. So there's a period of time when we've got to abide by it anyway. Secondly, I think the government has had the wind up about it, because if the only way in which we can show that we're going to abide by this is that we abide by the European legislation, and then we have the Great Repeal Bill that says, or whatever it's called, that says we're going to abide by the European legislation. That's a bit late, because people transferring data to us from mainland Europe or from Southern Ireland might say you're not a safe country to transfer it to. Now, in order to cover that potential accusation, the government is going to have a data protection bill just to complicate matters, which will basically contain all of GDPR in it. So it's actually in the British national legislation way before it comes in as a result of the European legislation, to forestall any doomsayers in mainland Europe to say that we're not a safe place to transfer personal data to.
Right.
So the government recognises this, and they've said quite emphatically that this isn't going to be repealed as and when we leave the European Union.
So it, or something like very like it, will exist regardless.
I think it's recognised that at the moment we're so used to whizzing data around Europe. I mean, don't forget, this is bedrock legislation that goes all the way across Europe, so that if you give your information to a Polish company, if you give your personal data to a Belgian company, you know that these minimum standards are going to be met by those companies within the European Union.
Right.
And it all comes into force at exactly the same time across the European Union. Now, some countries, such as Germany and Austria, have an even more stringent data protection set up than we do. We're British, so we do what's required of us, but we don't go any further than that. For various historical reasons that I used to think was to do with the Gestapo, but in fact it's more to do with the Stasi. Certain countries, such as Germany and Austria, have a much more stringent data protection set up than we do. They abide by the European rules, but then they go a bit further there. So not all the European countries have got the same data protection rules, but all the European countries, even the outlying ones like Southern Ireland and Greece, have the same minimum data protection rules as GDPR, or will have from May next year.
You don't really think of Southern Ireland as being an outlying country.
I meant geographically.
Yeah, because they're quite. I mean,
I do apologise for any Greek or Irish viewers.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't.
Or any who are both.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't be. It wouldn't be
Interesting combination.
Absolutely. So this is it's going to happen regardless.
Correct.
Right, it's going to happen regardless. There's going to be a framework which is very much like the framework that we've seen to date. It or something like it's going to be around. You've actually done quite a bit of preparation here. I'm looking down at the various things that you've prepared.
It's the same sheet but photocopied a number of times.
I
don't want to abuse it.
Yes, I mean
mislead you.
Tell me about what do you want to say about this?
What I'd like to say about it is I'm not going to try and go through the nitty-gritty of it, because there isn't enough time, and I would recommend the viewer pays somebody else to go through the nitty-gritty. All I would say, or the principal thing I would say, is if you're running a business, you will need to tackle this subject. You will need to go and find someone, you will need to go and read a book, you will need to go and Google it and find out what's going on. Whoever you use should be alongside you and helping you actually meet it. If you can make a commercial opportunity out of it or get some kind of commercial advantage out of it, so much the better. But you can't duck this one. It's a locomotive coming down the tracks, and It's not going to leave the tracks. Yep. So you will have to deal with it. Second point, if you are going to deal with it sooner, because that gives you more time to get involved in it. The people that you need to speak to will be easier to get hold of, and it'll probably be cheaper to deal with it earlier rather than later. There will be a lot more legal verbiage. There will be a lot of people, saying in their best John McEnroe voice, I don't believe it, or that can't be true, or anything like that. The rules about personal data are being considerably increased. They're being considerably, the stakes for getting it wrong are being increased. I think the worst thing is not so much the fines. The fines are quite horrendous, because they could be up to 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover, if greater.
To a maximum.
To a maximum of that, that's true. Although, relatively speaking, there are relatively few fines. In the last 12 months, the Information Commissioner had about 17,000 complaints, and only 16 of those resulted in a fine. What I'm saying to clients is don't worry about that too much. What you should worry about is the obligation to go and report data breaches to the Information Commissioner, and also to tell the data subjects, i.e. the customers, and that could be very, very embarrassing.
What do we mean by a breach? What constitutes a breach?
If you discover that a third party, by some means or another, has managed to get into the personal data that you currently hold,
Right.
you're expected to have appropriate data security measures. Now, you're not going to go to prison because of a data security breach. However, there could be a massive loss in confidence by your customers in you if you have to confess to the fact that their data was taken away. There have been some horrendous things that have happened recently where companies have not confessed up to what had gone on for, say, 2 years afterwards.
Wasn't there a case of one of the broadband providers who...
Yes, I mean, there was TalkTalk is the one that everybody mentions in different lectures, and as they floundered around and started talking about what was going on, I couldn't understand who on earth they were getting advice from, because they didn't seem to be getting much advice from it. That's the one that people always mention.
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience, virtually all the mobile phone companies don't take data protection very seriously at all. They have lots of pre-tick boxes, and those are completely verboten nowadays.
Right. So pre-tick boxes, which confer your consent on them, regardless.
That's right, because there has to be a positive opt-in. It can't be what's called a soft opt-in, where you've already ticked the box and you can untick the box if you don't want to do it.
Right.
That's very much frowned upon. If you see a pre-ticked box, it's basically a large sign saying, "I don't know anything about data protection."
Right. So it's going to be written by someone who isn't conversant
Up to
with
date,
the right. It's also, to be fair to them, they want to they want to speed things up. They want to kind of they want to. The reason for automating a sales process like that is to reduce the costs. So the faster you make it, the quicker you can get people through the.
Yes, I'm not sure that it necessarily saves very much time. It may. I think it's more a question of glossing over an issue.
Well, isn't it also a case of how people doing what they always have done?
I think there's also a generational because I've got 2 daughters. Their attitude towards data protection is whatever. They're not too fussed about it. I think the older the person is, I think the more protective about their personal data is the case.
I kind of we're not enormously far apart from in terms of age.
I've never been so insulted in my life.
But I personally I personally understand that my movements can be traced by my mobile phone.
Yeah.
I can be physically tracked. There's lots of metadata about if you own a loyalty card, a Nectar card.
Understood. Which is why I haven't got any.
And there are also huge amounts of data around that can be traced around your credit card transactions. I also understand the fact that when I send and receive emails, I'm sending a digital postcard,
Okay.
so it can be read at any point. They're unencrypted. They can be read. So the fact is, you're putting a message, and it's not in an envelope. It can be read at any point along the along its route of transmission. I understand how complex that route of transmission is, and I don't care.
Right, okay. What I would say, everything you've just said is true. Where GDPR comes in is what any third party does with that data.
Yeah,
Because they might have that data, and if they just use it for the purposes that they got it to start with, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if they're going to use it for any other purposes, and you're not aware of them using it for those third party reasons, then they're going to be in breach of GDPR.
Yes.
I think GDPR is a recognition that you're right. We all leave a massive digital footprint,
Yep.
But that information should just lie low, unless the person has either got your consent or has got a legitimate interest in using that information.
But I also take the view of the fact that if somebody's reading my emails, they really, I'm such a boring, dreary.
I didn't want to mention it.
Yeah, But the reality is that if if someone at GCHQ is reading my emails, they're not doing their job right.
I'm afraid I can't comment.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality is I am not a criminal. I don't bother evading my taxes. I don't bother evading my taxes. I don't intend to plant bombs or any of that stuff. Right. I don't want to kind of therefore I'm not of any interest to anybody in other than the people I'm communicating with.
That's true, but surely you could turn it around the other way and say that if the local paper published your viewing history, that you're
my internet, my browsing history.
That's right. I mean, would you be that happy about that?
I wouldn't. I have nothing to hide.
Right, but I mean, couldn't some of the websites that you looked at be construed as meaning that you were either interested in a particular cause or not in a particular cause, and that information could be misunderstood? Well,
but I mean, I put political signs outside my house.
Right.
In favour of particular parties. So,
yes. Okay.
So that's a I'm not necessarily again I've got nothing to hide. I quite wear my heart on my sleeve from that point of view.
Right.
Okay. Who that is, by the way, is not the subject of debate here.
These signs that you put up, do they get taken down? Or
no. Yeah. Well, the party question comes and retrieves them.
Oh right. Okay. Well, before the election, or
no. After
the embarrassment of having them outside your house.
After the candidate was duly elected.
Right.
So after my chosen candidate, following my support.
Cause and effect. Cause and effect is all I can say.
Yes, indeed. So I guess what I'm saying is the fact that I understand all this information is out there. I also understand the fact that it is the task of actually finding out about it, putting that into some sort of usable form, is so colossal.
I think that's right, because when I've heard criticisms of the government use of information, those in the government who I know have said, do you really think we're even capable of misusing this information in that way? Would that we were even joined up enough to be able to do it?
Absolutely.
So I am not particularly, I'm quite a civil libertarian, but I'm not particularly concerned about the government's misuse of information. I'm much more concerned, if we're talking on a personal point of view, in some of the IT giants who are collecting goodness knows how much information, and it would be the easiest thing in the world for them to put two and two together and to use the combination of that information for commercial purposes. One of the things that I find really depressing is that very few things.
Like who?
Right, I don't. don't want to go into specific names, but if you think of large American-owned IT-related companies, you wouldn't be too far away from the truth. One of the things I find quite depressing is when I get emails or when I get pop-ups, they're always there for a reason. And if I think back, just to give you an example, I read an article about quite a well-known divorce lawyer, quite a female divorce lawyer.
Yep.
And I was quite intrigued by this woman. She was a bit of a one-off, and I thought, gosh, so I went and looked her up and worked out where she'd gone to university or what her age was and whatever. Now, I then got lots of pop-ups about getting a divorce afterwards. Now, fortunately, I don't share that PC with my wife. But had I looked at this from my home PC, my wife could have perhaps drawn the conclusion that I was quite interested in getting a divorce, because why was I getting all these pop-ups?
Well, I think, I also, I'm torn about all this.
I'm not torn.
Well, yes, and you have a professional interest in an opinion. I mean, the other reason that you own, the other aspect about a Nectar card, a store card, it could be a loyalty card of whatever type. So it's whether that's and I have both the Tesco and the Sainsbury's version of it. It also allows the store to track what they've sold.
Yeah.
So they can then have a legitimate way of restocking the files. But there's also information which is perfectly well in the public domain, which is that they've got your address, and from your address they can construe, or they can infer certain things about your social class, household income. They can also look up, and again, this is in the public domain, is there a company director who lives in the house, is there a solicitor?
That's true, but let's not make this mistake. The mere fact it's in the public domain does not mean it's not personal data under data protection legislation.
But they have to actually, but they've got to actually go out and find this.
Fine.
And there's also the fact that your that information in your card, if they trouble to look at it, and I don't believe that the supermarkets are that sophisticated, to be honest. If they can infer certain things about you. Have you got a dog? Have you got a baby? Do you buy wine? What sort of wine do you buy? How do you react to the store layout? Do you buy more things if they on ILM promotions and so on? There's lots and lots of actually pretty useful information that they can get that I would find actually quite helpful.
Oh no, I accept that there are advantages of it. I mean, if the truth be told, the reason why I don't have any of these loyalty cards is not because of the data protection side. I mean, that's not something which I regard as a particularly high risk from the data protection point of view. The reason why I don't is because I think it confuses the purchasing decision, and I'd rather make the purchasing decision free of any kind of tilting of my decision because there's some kind of loyalty card that I've got.
You mean you don't want to buy petrol from you would rather not get a discount from Sainsbury's in the long run because you can't be bothered to hold the card.
I mean, can't be bothered is part of it, but it's more the fact that I will make a decision when I buy, and I will make a decision about what I will pay. And I don't want it to be influenced by that.
Well, I mean, we actually, we as a household, my wife and I share the same loyalty card account, and once a year, which is Christmas. The only time.
So they think you're a highly scented dipsomaniac.
Well, no doubt. Well, and they wouldn't be far from the truth.
I didn't know your wife drank.
Well, Sainsbury's certainly think that. The point is that once a year we cash this loyalty.
And how much do you get?
About £100.
Is it really worth it?
At Christmas, yeah.
Okay,
It is.
okay.
Yeah, it is. It's well worth it. I mean, that's what, £2 a week.
Right. Okay.
It's kind of it's trivial in the scheme of things. Nonetheless, it's a for the cost of just waving your card every time you buy a.
But you only get points on shops that actually accept the Nectar card.
Oh, true. Yeah. Which is every BP station, every branch of Sainsbury's, etc.
This must be one of the most disguised adverts for the Nectar card there's ever been.
Well, indeed.
Particularly when people think they're listening to a talk about GDPR.
I actually really disapprove of their tie with the Daily Mail, but that's another. That's largely because
I couldn't possibly comment.
I disapprove of the Daily Mail. Which,
right.
That is another.
May I suggest putting signs up outside your house?
Absolutely.
They seem to have been very effective up to now.
No Daily Mail here.
It can be taken down when they cease publication.
You know what? There is no Daily Mail here, apart from when my sister-in-law comes. We've covered quite a bit of ground here. Actually, where's this going? I mean, are you sort of are you happy with the way things are going? Are you happy with the fact that the advice you can give your clients?
I'm not unhappy. I'm old enough and ugly enough to know that legislation comes in that you simply have to comply with. It must be a bit like when VAT started.
Yep.
It's probably all a nightmare there.
Yep.
And when other different taxes started, I can see the point of it. There's, it's not sort of completely done on a whim.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of sympathy with anybody running a business who's suddenly faced with this issue that they have to comply with, and they're not going to make any money out of it unless they get a mild commercial advantage out of it, as I've mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
and it's just another obligation that's put on business that they've got to comply with in order to comply with the law. Mm-hmm. But we operate under the rule of law. It's been thought that there's been enough of a run-up to it. This has been going on for years, and it's been widely consulted about, and there is a certain degree of logic. I have to say there are certain parts of it which I think are unworkable. One of the things which I think is unworkable, if you ask me what part I do think is unworkable, if you're the data controller, in theory, your data processor, if again a subcontract any work, has got to come back to you and get your permission. But what standing do you have? If you've already contracted out to the data processor,
It's implied permission.
Well, if they're going to subcontract it out to somebody else, presumably that's within their knowledge. If they come back to me and ask me about it as the data controller, I'm going to say, well, that's what I gave you to do. If you are going to subcontract it, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Go and use the best guys that you think. I don't know enough about it. That's why I've asked you to subcontract it to be my subcontractor in the first part. So a lot of those kind of things, I'm drafting in that the data controller gives the data processor blanket authority to subcontract it, but I'm connecting with that, or immediately afterwards saying that if the data controller asks the data processor which subcontractors they're using, they've got to provide the information at that point.
Right.
So if they want to know where all this information has gone, they can go and ask. But I think it's just unworkable. I mean, it's part and parcel of the service that the data processor is providing, that they might well use a data sub-processor such as a hosting company, such as a cloud company, and it's not really within the ambit of the knowledge of the data controller as to whether these are good guys or not good guys.
Yeah, that's a commercial decision, really, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay, well, I think we're done here. Thanks very much. Cheers. Been a pleasure.
Well, thank goodness the viewer thinks. Thank goodness.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, and we're done.